Hey guys, welcome back to the Another Excuse podcast. I'm your host, Byron Greeley, and today's guest is Rae Lambert, the co-founder and CEO of River. River is an in-person event and social platform that orchestrates events at a global scale. It's for brands and influencers by leveraging volunteer hosts sourced from the community. It's a really cool idea, and I've actually used River a few times to go to meetups for one of my favorite podcasts, My First Million. In this episode, we discuss how River started and how Rae was just a fan of the All In podcast, and she created meetups around the 100th episode and the 125th episode, and that kind of turned into what River is today. We also discuss the challenges in product development, community preferences and fundraising, the fear of failure, the ability to execute. It's a wide-ranging conversation, and Rae is awesome. I'm pretty sure you're going to enjoy this one. I know I did. Enjoy the show. Hey Rae, thanks for joining me today. When we last chatted, there were many different directions that this conversation could go in, so I'm really excited to get into it. Just so to get started, could you tell us a bit about River and what you guys do?
Yeah, thanks for having me, Byron. I'm Rae, co-founder of River. We are an in-person event and social platform. We orchestrate events at global scales for brands and influencers and communities by leveraging volunteer hosts who are sourced from the community. And the results are, instead of planning a small number of events that maybe have a lot of RSVPs and a lot of attendees, you can host hundreds of simultaneous events all around the world with crowdsourced hosts.
Awesome. Yeah, I've actually been to a few events that use River.
Amazing.
To the My First Million podcast, I went to a few in London. So yeah, I think it's a really cool product.
Thanks for going. Yeah.
And what gave you the idea to start River?
Solving my own itch problem. I'm a big fan of the All In podcast, and I had been to the first summit in Miami. Really enjoyed who I was meeting there. Just kind of like refreshingly more diverse group than like typical tech meetups. I lived in San Francisco for 7 years and New York City for 3, and I'm originally from like the Maine, Boston area. And then when I moved to Miami, like the tech scenes were just very different. And I was like, I'm not finding a lot of builders. It's just like maybe a lot of crypto speculators or like a lot of real estate people who thought the founders were rich and that we wanted to buy houses or boats, which we definitely don't want to do. So because I enjoyed everyone I met at the summit, I was like, maybe I'll host a listening party. Episode 100 of the podcast was coming up. And I was like, oh, that'd be a fun way to kind of find more of those types of people. So I DM'd Jason Calacanis, the host of the All In Pod, and he and I had connected before. And I was like, hey, are you going to live stream episode 100? You totally should. And if you do, I'll time my party to be around, which I understand is very audacious for me to be like, please live stream this and tell me what time it's going to be. But he's like, we're not going to live stream it, but this sounds cool. You should start a sign up for him and I'll retweet it. And I was like, all right. So I made an Airtable. It was SF. My friend Melissa was going to host. Miami, I would host. And I had spent a lot of time in Austin. So I was like, maybe Austin will do it. And then write in your city. And do you want to host? Check this box. And I really thought like 3-4 cities maybe would do it. And that would be like funny. And that would be it. But JCal retweeted it like he said he would, and it went viral. And we ended up hosting meetups in 24 cities around the world with about 1,000 people. And, no tech. It was just Airtable form, Google Calendar, and BCC email lists to each city. After that happened, I was like, whoa, that was weird. Like, why did I do that? But it was fun. And I met great people in Miami. And then I was like, okay, this is a cool list. Like, now, if I go to Zurich, I can meet someone for coffee or, that's all I thought it would be.
Yeah.
While we were doing these meetups, I started a Slack because I was like, we got to organize ourselves. So then there was like 1,000 people in this Slack, and 6 months later, episode 125 was coming around, and everyone's like, "We're doing it again, right, Rae?" And I was like, "Hell no, we are not doing that again. That was so much work. Why did I even do that in the first place? I don't know why I did that. It was fucking weird." And my husband was like, "Why did you do that? That was so much work. Like, don't you have better things to do?" I'm like, "Yeah, I guess I do. I don't know." But enough people asked. I was like, "Okay, this is cool. It was fun. Like, let's do it again. I'll find a tool for it." And we tried Luma. We used Luma, which I had used Luma many times before. It's a great UX attendee experience. But as the person orchestrating all of the events, it just did not scale. Like, couldn't vet the hosts on the platform. So there'd be a lot of confusion about, like, is this person hosting or not? When you added them to the event, they could just download the data and then like upload that to their newsletter list. So then people got spammed a lot. I would have this little blurb about all in meetups and like, "Hey, here's the Slack, here's the info." And then the host would delete that, like not on purpose, but they just didn't realize I needed that. And then just like a lot, like couldn't tell which events were like engaged and happening. The only way I could tell is like having all 50 tabs open and just manually checking and tracking it all offline in a spreadsheet. And I was just like, "Oh my God, why did I do this again? Didn't I learn my lesson the first time?" But Jason saw that we pulled off 50 events around the world. So it was twice as big the second time. And he's like, "How the hell did you do that?" And I was just like, "Bodies, man, bodies." Like, I just pulled 6 people off my marketing agency to help me with it. And he's like, "I want to hire you to do this for This Week in Startups," his other podcast. And I was like, "Great, here's the quote." And he's like, "That's way too much money." I was like, "Actually, that was a discount because I really want to work with you, but there's just so much work." And he's like, "How about I give you $100,000 and you build a SaaS instead?" And so that's River.
That's a really cool story. And like, what made you, like, you were hesitant to do the second round for the 125th episode. What made you do it again?
Just a lot of, like, the reason I didn't want to do it is because there's so much work. And I was like, what exactly is like the point? Like, what am I getting out of this? I don't know. Like, sure, I have an email list, but like, I'm not going to email these people. Like, what am I going to get? But just so many people said they had such a good time doing it. And I heard so many stories of people being like, it's just really hard to find a little bit more open-minded people. Tech can be extremely liberal, or it's really hard to find people who are like into free markets and like want to build wealth for other people. And so just, I don't know, people were just saying they're having extremely cathartic experiences. Like, people were meeting co-founders, people were meeting their spouses, like just good things were happening of it. And I really enjoyed all the meetups I was personally attending and hosting. And so I was like, okay, but I never would have done it if I realized how much work it was going to be. Like, I came in like I was oblivious to how much work. Like, if I had known, I wouldn't have done it.
That's crazy. And I'm curious, how do you guys make money at the moment?
We charge creators or like communities directly. It's a SaaS, like, subscription revenue model. We're very early days, so God knows what our pricing should look like. We've just been like throwing spaghetti at the wall so far. I think we're so right now, like, All In Podcast pays us, and then we manage all the events using the platform. But we are rolling out a sponsorship marketplace, which I think might end up being a totally different monetization avenue where, for example, if we could get Mr. Beast on the platform to do like park, river, ocean cleanups across the whole world, he would probably bring a sponsor, and then we would just take some fee out of that sponsor revenue. So yeah, we'll see.
Awesome. And the people that host the events, they sort of do it just because they're a huge fan of that particular podcast or community. Is that correct?
Yeah. So every community is different, but there's kind of incentive structures that communities will set up. So, for example, when Tim Ferriss did his 10th anniversary podcasts, we did like, I don't know how many cities, 150 cities. The hosts, he ended up, I don't think most people just like to do it because they want to meet like-minded people in their city and they just think it sounds fun. But he ended up doing an exclusive AMA after the fact and well, first of all, he dialed into as many cities as he could and had like a short Zoom call with them and the hosts. And then he later on invited all the hosts to like a private AMA. So that's how Tim did it. Solana's foundation, they power 2 communities on River, Super Team and Solana. And Super Team, they actually reimburse hosts for host expenses using the platform. And then they have a Solana ecosystem call once a month, which is like a live talk show, basically, of like everything that's happening in the ecosystem. And they shout out top hosts there. So yeah, I think a lot of people do it to build their own local network.
Yeah. And it's a great way to do that, because I went to, like I said, the My First Million podcast, and you can see that the people who hosted it are just like a bit more in the radar of even the hosts, but also everyone else who attends sort of sees them as the host and they know them more. They like remember their names and stuff. So there is a lot of benefit to it.
Yeah, that. And then there's plenty of people who tell me like they're kind of interested in hosting, but just like a meetup in general, but just the idea of like coming up with a concept and starting from scratch and like having no one come to your first 4 meetups like just kind of sucks. Whereas this, you kind of know what you're getting. Like if you are hosting a My First Million meetup, you kind of know who's going to show up. You don't know the names of people, but you know that they're going to be like scrappy, like side hustle, trying to start a business, probably not that interested in venture, like bootstrapping, businesses or like sweaty businesses. So you kind of know like who you're going to meet and you get excited about that. And then you just like, as long as you're not in a totally podunk town, you can kind of just like inherit 30 RSVPs. And that feels great compared to like relying on your own LinkedIn post and then 3 people RSVP. And then it just kind of sad.
Yeah. And exactly what you said there. It's almost a more niche version of a typical meetup. Like even if you go on like the Meetup app or Eventbrite and it's like Entrepreneurship meetup or something, you don't realize how vague that actually is.
It's so vague.
And you can get like a wish-wash of people who like, there's like the entrepreneurs on one side, and then like people who want to talk serious business will take one look at it and leave again. And so when you come to these meetups where you're fans of a particular podcast, you sort of know the demographic that you're going to get. And it's also, I found it a great icebreaker because you sort of skip the bullshit and it's not like, oh, so what are you from? What do you do? Yeah. It's like, what are you working on? Because I'm also interested in that. And then we can share stories. And as soon as you hear something that you really like, you just spend more time talking to that person. There's no sort of faffing around and like small talk.
Yeah. And then also the way they end up announcing it is like, well, Tim Ferriss announced it pretty widely, but like Sam and Sean, like they just mentioned it like buried in the episode for like 20 seconds. And so like it's only diehards that are kind of finding out about these things. And so you just know that like there's these people are like serious and have interested like same interests as you for sure. I think the wider these meetups get, because sometimes people got mad at me during the Tim Ferriss things. They're like, this is a scam. Tim's not going to be there. I'm like, well, no, he's not Santa Claus. He can't go to 150 cities. Like, or some people will be like, why are these all on the same day? Tim can't go to all the, I'm like, you think he's going on a tour of 150 cities? Okay. But some people are like, well, Tim's not going to be there, so I'm not going to go. And I'm like, great. This is not for you. Like, if you're interested in meeting this type of person in your neighborhood because you want to build local community with like-minded people, great. If you're here for like the celebrity of seeing Tim Ferriss and getting like a 3-second selfie with him, like, don't bother. It's not for you.
Yeah, exactly. And what caused you to take on that first meetup for the All In podcast for the 100th episode? Like, what motivated you to do that?
Like I said, I was in Miami and just like not enjoying meeting who I was meeting at these I was going to like tech meetups that were just huge. They're like 150 person meetups. There's a DJ blasting music. It's like high alcohol cocktails. And I just felt like I wasn't meeting builders, everyone I was meeting was like 20. I'm coming up on 38. I just wasn't meeting the people I wanted to go to at these, things that were public. And I was so new to the city that I wasn't getting invited to like more private like dinners or whatever. And so I was just really like, maybe this would be like a bellwether, like a banner to be like, hoping to meet the kind of people I wanted to meet, which is like a little more mature, a little more experienced, less interested in partying hard and more interested in building companies. Yeah.
And what did that do for your career? Because I mean, you were the head of these events, so people quite like high up in their industries or like established professionals were now looking to you to sort of guide them on how to run these events. So I'm sure that sort of elevated you in yourself and sort of circles. And I'm keen to hear how that helped.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, nothing like so direct came from it. Like I own a marketing agency and I'm not sure we've ever like gotten a client from the All In crowd, but I've also never really pushed my marketing agency on anyone, Olivine either. But I mean, yeah, for me, it's like building my network. Like I probably have more Twitter followers than I would have otherwise. But for me, it's really just like traveling often. Like I always hit up like the group if I'm going to Austin or wherever I'm going. And then when I go to the All In Summit, like I went to All In Summit last year in LA, I didn't realize how popular or how well known I was until I got to the summit. And I like couldn't go to the bathroom without like 5 people being like, "Oh my God, Rae." And I'm like, "I have to pee." Please leave me alone. Also, I'm introverted, which is another reason why I like wanted to meet more serious curated people and not like, to me, 100-person event is just like not my jam. I just get really tired and drained from it. I'm not shy at all. I'm like fine with public speaking or, interacting with other people, but I just like, big parties are just not my cup of tea. So I found that like All In events that I was hosting was just a lot more curated and smaller, but more intentional, I guess, higher ROI.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But yeah, I mean, I feel like my network is building and maybe some of my credibility, because like if you listen to the All In podcast frequently, they've mentioned me a few times, which is very sweet.
Yeah. And that initial DM to J. Cal, was that just like on a whim, or had you previously had contact with him, or how did you get his attention?
When I went to this first All In Summit in Miami, I noticed that everyone that said they were going to the summit on Twitter was a male. And I don't actually care about going to All In events. I studied finance in college and I worked in finance and tech for my whole life. So doesn't bother me one bit, but I know that it's stressful for women to like show up. I think it was intimidating for a lot of women to go to this event. And I was like, you know what, I'll make a brunch reservation near the summit. And if I see any interesting looking women on Twitter saying they're going, I'll just DM them and see if they want to break the ice and come to brunch. And that like filled up instantly. I had a reservation for 12. And then my mentor, Mark DeVisser, I was just like getting a taco with him and he's like, "Oh, you should invite J-Cal to your brunch." Just like he said it like in passing. And I was like, "What? No, he's busy. He can't, he's running a conference. Like he can't come to brunch." And he's like, "He might come to brunch." And he's like, "Just invite him." All he can say is no. I was like, okay. So I DM J-Cal saying like, "Hey, I'm putting together this women's brunch. I'm not going to tell anyone I've invited you, so you don't have to let anyone down. But if you want to stop by and like say hi and like take a group pic, it'd be great to have you." And he's like, "Yeah, send me the details." So he ended up coming to brunch, like for the whole brunch, and he sat with us. He chatted with every single person. He got to know all of us, and I really enjoyed meeting him. And then he bought us all brunch. And then a lot of photos got posted on Twitter. And so at the first summit, I was affectionately known as Brunch Girl, which is not very serious. But yeah, so that's how I initially met Jason. And then, when I DM'd him again, which, I don't DM him often, but when I DM'd him again, I was like, "Hey, Rae here, like Brunch Girl." Are you going to stream it? Yeah, that's how we got connected.
Oh, that's really cool. And it sounds, well, it was a really scrappy start for the 100th episode and the 125th episode.
Oh my God, so brutal.
And why do you think some people overcomplicate things and sort of get in their own way of starting? It seems like you just made it work, and even though it was scrappy and you got 6 people in from your team. You just like made it happen and made sure everything ran smoothly. But some people would have been like, no, we need a platform to do X, Y, and Z. So like maybe let's wait to episode 150 so we can sort it out. Like why do you think that is?
I mean, I'm definitely an action-oriented person. But like in my defense, like I didn't know it was going to do well. Like I was just like, oh, I'll host Miami. My friend Melissa will host San Francisco. And then like maybe something in Austin will happen. Like my expectations are so low. If I had known it was going to explode to 25 cities, I would have done it. Or, I would have like gotten a better plan in place. But it just like, I just accidentally found myself like holding a tiger by the tail. And I was like, okay, well, I don't want to let everyone down now. So let's just see what comes of it. I also think because I'm a marketer and my background's initially in finance, but then I pivoted to marketing later in life. I can't write code. And so sometimes I think I just think of the scrappiest thing to do just because my hands are tied and I can't write some clever thing to do it. But hilariously, like I completely fucked up. Like, so the Airtable, I let you, when I said like, hey, select which city you want to be notified, like meetup in, I let people select multiple cities, not thinking about my data structure at all, which was fine. But some people selected like all the cities, which I did not anticipate. But then when I emailed people, when I was like filtering for Airtable, I'd be like, city is Miami. Not city includes Miami. City is Miami. So anyone who selected multiple cities never got an email from me. And there still was 24 cities with 1,000 people going to them. Like, imagine if I had just like, thought for 2 seconds about like whatever my data setup was. But, lessons learned. But yeah, I tend to be like action oriented, and I never, many times in my career, like my career is not a straight line. It's kind of like a playground. I think of it like a playground, not a ladder. And so I try to just follow my interests as much as I can, even if the ROI isn't exactly clear or it's not clear exactly what's going to happen. Because believe me, like my husband saw me like working till 3 a.m., like trying to deal with these meetups. And he's like, why what are you doing, lady? Like, but I was just like, I don't know. There's just something special happening. And I'm just going to like try to make it happen for people. And then also like post-COVID, a lot of people have dispersed out of major cities. And I felt this too. Like, you're trying to find your people and it's just very difficult to find your people. And so, the idea that like 12 people were going to get together in Cincinnati just kind of like warmed my heart. And I was like, okay, yeah, I can't let Cincinnati down. Like stuff like that. So yeah, I don't know why I did it. I mean, just interest and like seeing, hoping that something good will come from it, either an outcome or you just like learn something.
Yeah. I think that's a perspective that a lot of entrepreneurs take. It's like they have a feeling and they can't really explain what exactly it is, but they just feel like it's the right thing to do. And then you frame it in a way where it's a positive outcome no matter what the actual outcome is, because you're going to learn from this experience. You're probably going to meet some people. Even if 50 people come, like you've met 50 more people that you are so similar to and you can connect with, and maybe opportunities will come from it. But yeah, even if it doesn't turn out to be 1,000 people, whatever it is. So that's a very common trait. What kind of problems, well, you've mentioned some problems that you ran into when you first started. It was all very scrappy and stuff. I'm curious about what kind of problems you've run into since starting River, so the River part of the journey. What kind of problems have you guys run into?
Do you want to talk about product or fundraising?
Well, whatever comes to mind. I'm just intrigued.
Yeah, I mean, on the product side, we just have a lot to build. You could think of River, a lot of people, because they just attend events, they don't host and they're not a community manager. They just think of it as like an event app, and honestly like a crappier Luma because our UX is not as smooth. But we actually have all this like role-based permissioning in the background and like community level settings where it's like these hosts are pre-approved, these hosts are not, these hosts get emails, these hosts don't. Like we have a lot of like dashboards and automations that's like, hey, this event has 21 RSVPs, but no host. Let's send an email to all the attendees saying, hey, hosting is easy. Please just step up and choose the pub near your house and meet people. So we just have like tons of things on the platform that the average like attendee doesn't think of or see. Meanwhile, like the UX is not as smooth or snappy as some of like Partiful or Luma. And then coupled with the fact that we have some huge names on the platform, like All In, Tim Ferriss, Brian Johnson, This Week in Startup, Solana Foundation, people just assume that we're really like old and established when actually we're less than a year old and we've only raised $150,000. So when someone's like, it'd be really great if you had this Partiful feature, I'm like, you know what Partiful also has that we don't have? $20 million from Andreessen Horowitz. Yeah, I'll get to that, but I think just because we have this, like, we have such big names on the platform, people just like think that we're older and all this shit should be figured out. And we're just like barely making it. So that's like some problems on the product side. And then just like community preferences. So like we have Web3 communities who don't want to show their name or their face, and they definitely don't connect on LinkedIn, and they hate email, and then we have This Week in Startups, who it's for founders by founders, no service providers or agency owners. So we need to see your LinkedIn and we need to see your face. And like, there's just so many different community settings that there just isn't like one size fits all. And then some communities are extremely stringent on the types of people who can host, and some are more open. And so just building in the control on the community level has been like difficult. And we always joke, we're like, it's just a CRUD app. Like, if you know what a CRUD app is, it's like create, read, update, delete. Like, should be simple, right? And it's like time zones, SMS delivery, permissions, just like, so, a lot of product challenges. And then also just like a new notion for people, they don't understand, like, why do I need permission to host? And it's like, well, you're kind of representing the Tim Ferriss brand. And, there's 100 people coming to your event because Tim Ferriss said, go to this meetup, and so you don't just get the data. You don't just get to do whatever you want with it. You're kind of borrowing, you're an extension of this brand. And so that's hard for some people to understand. Because they're like, well, on Luma, I just create my event. I'm like, yeah, but no one comes to it. So we've had those problems. And then, on the fundraising side, this is my second company, but my first venture-backed company, my last company is a marketing agency that I just bootstrapped with a co-founder to about $2 million in annual revenue. And I'd say I'm a good operator, but I'm definitely not a good fundraiser, like casting vision, negotiating value caps, like creating FOMO. I mean, these things have been very difficult. And then we've just been wedged in this weird place where a lot of our users are Web3. So we have we had a lot of interest from VCs in the Web3 space, but they're like, well, you're not Web3 enough. But then like normal Web2 VCs are like, what's this whole Web3 angle? We're scared of this. We're spooked. So we've just been like in this kind of like weird place there. And then, and then I'm just generally new to fundraising and like chewing all the glass, like learning all the hard mistakes the first time around. So like we just ran so tight. We were on 150 grand for our first year, made that last year. And then just now putting together the pre-seed round. And thankfully, Blockchain Founders Capital, who are godsends, wired their portion of the money. So we are not starving.
That's good. How much are you guys looking to raise in this pre-seed round?
This will be 1.5 million. Perhaps will be a little bit oversubscribed. It's just like a lot of circular referencing to figure out. You never get quite exactly to the number you want, but 1.5 million, which is still, I think, maybe on the modest side. Well, I don't know. Pre-seed and seed is all getting mixed up these days. But we're a really capital efficient team, small team. So it'll last a while.
How big is your team?
There's 6 of us. So myself and I have 2 technical co-founders, Bernie and Ryan. And then we have 2 full stack engineers, Andrew and Ed. And then Anna, who helped me do all in meetups from the very first Airtable. She recently came on as our director of community. So 6 of us. And then we have 2 contracted designers, one more on like product side, one more on brand side.
Awesome. And Why do you think, or how were you guys able to get those bigger brands on board, like those huge podcasts? What made them join River?
Yeah, well, All In was my community, and I got to pick where we hosted events, and I picked River, obviously. And then Jason Calacanis has This Week in Startups, and he's an investor. And then he rolled out founder jam sessions on River, so that was like two for one, basically.
Yes.
And then when I was doing all in meetups, like the scrappy way without a proper tool set, Sam Parr from My First Million saw what I was doing, and he like retweeted and he was like, "This is cool. If someone does this from My First Million, I'll show you on the pod." A bunch of like 6 guys, like all spun up competing landing pages and like trying to be like me. And I was like, guys, like collaborate, don't compete. It's a lot of work. Not going to be able to pull it off on your own. And if you guys all agree to collaborate, I'll like get on a Zoom call and tell you everything I know. And they got on the Zoom call, but they like couldn't quite like pull it off and like make it happen. And so I knew that My First Million would be like, as soon as I was like even remotely ready, I would reach out to Sam and be like, okay, I'm ready to do My First Million meetups, which we did. And then I think I saw Brian Johnson tweeting about how he wanted to do meetups, and then he was going to organize the Don't Die meetups on his Discord server, which I just knew from personal experience that wasn't going to go well, or not to the scale I knew he wanted to do. So I reached out to him about River, and I think someone from Solana Group, Akshay, probably put in a good word for us. So we worked with Brian Johnson, and then for Tim Ferriss, he tweeted and about, it was his 10th anniversary coming up. He's like, "What should we do? Wild and crazy ideas, welcome." And I responded to the tweet and was just like, "Tim, I read the 4-Hour Work Week. I was living in Boston, hating my life, working in finance. I saw that you were an angel investor in this place called Silicon Valley, which I had never heard of. And it led me and my husband to move sight unseen to San Francisco. Now we have River. We would love to get your fans together all around the world to celebrate your 10th anniversary." And then he back channeled my email, I guess, or something. And I heard from his team like 3 days later. So that's how I got Tim.
Wow.
My job as CEO, tech CEO, is just be on Twitter.
But the rare thing is, like, you actually shoot your shot, but in a way where like you can back it up. Because I think there's 2 different types of people on Twitter. There's the ones that like don't give a shit and will shoot their shot all day, every day, and that's what they do on Twitter, but they can't really back it up. And so actually a lot of shooting your shot gets lost in the noise. Or you do it in a way where you shoot your shot, you have the credentials to back it up, and these people actually take interest and take a look at your product. And
Yeah,
the third person is a person who just doesn't have the balls. They're
doesn't try.
Yeah, I wish I could do that.
Yeah, I mean, believe me, like I think my experience in marketing, like there's no fluff. Like value prop is right there at the top of the message. And believe me, like when I saw that tweet, I was just like, guys, stop everything you're doing. We're replying to this tweet. And I'm like writing this, I like get on my lap, because I think I was like at a coffee shop on my phone, just like scrolling. And I was like, okay, gotta be at keys, like at a real desktop. I'm like writing the tweet, editing the tweet, seeing what people think of the tweet, and then I'm sending the tweet. So it wasn't just like a willy-nilly.
Yeah.
I was like writing this tweet with like everything I had. Yeah, and honestly, getting Sam Parr was a little bit similar. Like he already knew about me and had tweeted about me and all in meetups, but like it had been like 6 months or more. And then when I was going to reach out to him, he had just had a baby. I was like, okay, he definitely doesn't want to talk about meetups because he just had a baby. And then his dog died. And I'm like, okay, he's sad about his dog. He definitely doesn't want to talk about meetups. But then I saw him kind of like emerge on Twitter, and he tweeted, "Hey, I'm going to be speaking at this event tonight, and there's still some tickets left in Austin. And that was just like, I'm like, okay, he's back. Like, he's back working. He's like, he's
Yeah.
had his paternity leave. He's like kind of back in the game. And my founding engineer, Andrew, who's incredible, lives in Austin. And so I just went and I bought a ticket and I was like, Andrew, whatever you were planning to do tonight, you are no longer doing. You are going to this event. And he's like, what? It's for marketers. I'm like, you're going to this. And so then I kind of signed up Sam, like, I had some suspicions of what his email address was. I recorded him a Loom video. I had his events on the community page like set up. So I like recorded a video. I emailed him. I tweeted it. And anyone who had like signed up for the waitlist of River, who had said that their favorite podcast was My First Million, then I emailed them and I was like, please go like this tweet. So it got a lot of likes. And then Andrew went to the event. And at the very end of the event, he just went up to Sam and was like, can I get a selfie? And it was like, by the way, I'm Andrew. I'm building River. You might have gotten some tweets from Rae today. And then that night I got a text from Sam. He's just like, hey, let's do these meetups. So, a lot of people are like talking about automated outbound strategy. And like, this is like a tractor beam where I'm going after like, I'm thinking about 5 people at a time and that's it. This is not like scaled outbound, like ChatGPT is not ready. These messages, and I'm only going after people that I'm intimately familiar with. Like, I listen to tons of My First Million episodes. So like, I know exactly how to word this because I know how they talk.
Yeah.
I'm very interested in what Brian Johnson is bringing to the world. So when I reach out to him, like, I'm not coming uninformed.
So I think it's so great to highlight how much work and effort actually goes into like getting these people on board, because when you list the creators that are on River, you assume, well, you mentioned your all-in story and you assume that like some connections were made or introductions and it kind of just all happened together, but you're putting in the work, you're grinding and you're making it happen.
Yeah.
And a lot of people don't understand that.
Yeah. In fact, one person on Twitter, and like, they're meant to be helpful. They're like, oh, I think this is Sam's email. And then when they saw that like My First Million events like got announced, he's like, oh, congrats. Like, I'll take credit for that intro. And I'm like, first of all, that email might not have even been his real email. Second of all, this was not just an email that I sent. Like, I had a video, I had a tweet, I sent someone in person. This was a whole fucking psyop. Like,
Yeah.
This was a campaign, an account-based marketing campaign of one. And like, and I've been bidding my time for like 8 weeks. Like I was ready to pull the trigger, but I just knew Sam wasn't in his life. Like, he was just not in work mode. So I waited and waited and waited. So yeah, when someone's like, oh, you're welcome for the email, I'm like, well,
even that waiting for 8 weeks is part of the whole thing. It's you actually knowing what Sam is doing, what mindset he's in, how likely is he to actually agree to this or even read your messages. And so
totally.
It's not just a automated outbound strategy where you're just blasting him with emails and, hey, just bumping this up to the top of your inbox.
No, just following up. What do you think, Rachel? I mean, similarly, Balaji, who's our second angel investor, Balaji Srinivasan, I'm a huge fan of the network state concepts. I listened to the entire Balaji episode of Lex Friedman. It's 8 hours long. I listened to it the day it came out. And so my friend Taylor, who I met through All In Summit, by the way, I don't think she actually, maybe she came to, maybe she did come to my first women's brunch. She had tweeted saying like, hey, Balaji's on this new app called Farcaster. He's hosting an AMA next Tuesday. If you want to get in front of Balaji, this is probably your best chance. This Farcaster is like pretty early, not a lot of people. So I'm like, what is this Farcaster thing? I don't even know. I download this app. I don't really like mobile first apps because I'm 38 and I want everything on desktop. But I'm like, I'm sitting here like, okay. And then in the AMA, and it's a text-based AMA. It's not like live AMA. So I write my question, and my question was like, hey, how are you going to carry forward the concepts you outlined in the Network State Conference out into the real world and like build community around these things, like in real life. And, is this important to you? And no one liked how you can like upvote a message and it's like,
Yeah.
oh, the more votes, the more likely Balaji would be to reply. Like no one liked my message. So I was like, okay, no, he's not going to reply to this. But he shocked me by replying and said, yes, this is actually top 3 most important things I'm thinking about. If you want to help, get a Luma account. And I was like, Luma. But I was like, actually, like I've tried Luma, beautiful product, not going to scale to what you need in a decentralized way. I'd love to show you what I'm building. And he then later on told me that he didn't reply because I used like a real photo of myself and he thought that it was like generated by AI and I was just like a fake bot. But I guess he was intrigued enough to mention it to his friend Akshay. And then Akshay like DM'd me on Twitter to kind of sniff me out and was like, oh, wait, no, she's a real person doing real community stuff. So like that's how I got in touch with Balaji. But like some people think that like Jason introduced me. It's like, no, I actually try not to ask Jason for that kind of thing. It's like I'm going to try 10 times to get my own intro and then maybe I'll ask for him to put his weight behind something, but I don't really ask for those intros. Everyone I've gotten on my own.
And you said you're focusing on like 5 at a time. What would you say is your success rate?
I mean, the more I do, the less well it works. Like All In was my favorite podcast. I've listened to hundreds of episodes of This Week in Startups. I've listened to tons of My First Million, but like, and I really like Brian Johnson, but like, I don't listen to 50 podcasts, basically like everyone that I really listen to a lot, I already have. Obviously I love Joe Rogan. I love Broe Jogan. So I'll reach out to him at some point, although I think our platform, Joe has a very broad audience that isn't that tech savvy, and the app is just not in a place where it would solve everyone. You kind of have to just like be willing to like put up with some issues in the app. And usually like tech people are just earlier adopters and they just understand that things are not smooth. Yeah. So I would say the early success rate was like literally 100%. I've definitely had people like express interest, but then they just kind of ghost or, it's not like a huge part of like it's kind of a net new idea. So it's not like, oh, my plan was to do 100 meetups this year and find a platform for this. It's really just like, wait, I can host 100 meetups without doing any work. Like, it's just a totally new idea to people. I kind of compare it to early podcasting days where people are like, wait, you're just going to record 2 people talking and then put it on the internet? Like, why would you do that? I think it's kind of a new idea. So it's not like on everyone's bucket list to do for the year. I need to kind of show them that it's something worth doing.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I'd like to switch gears a bit and chat about people coming up with ideas and kind of holding on to them as though they're really valuable and not sharing them and so not doing anything with them. I was wondering if you thought that whether there is such thing as a new idea.
No, I don't think there is. I mean, there obviously is. Like, obviously, there are new ideas. I do have, plenty of friends or loved ones who are in search of the perfect idea. And it's like, oh, well, someone's already doing that. I can't do that because someone's already doing that. I'm like, well, last I counted, there were 8 billion people on the planet. So coming up with a new novel idea, thinking that you will ever come up with a new novel idea is incredibly arrogant. Like, just so unabashedly arrogant in a way. Obviously new ideas like do emerge and exist. But at any one time, there could be hundreds of thousands of people who all have the same idea. And it's really just like who can execute. Yeah. That said, like, I'm very tech optimist. I believe that secrets are valuable in certain industries, especially like hard tech. But for the most part, 99 times out of 100, when I see people not wanting to share an idea, it's just a cope. It's just like, it's a good excuse for not starting.
Yeah.
Usually.
Why do you think people want to make excuses to not start?
Oh, failure is fucking devastating. It's so tiring. And if you are doing anything new, like at all remotely novel or new, no one's going to like your idea. Like everyone's going to think your idea is stupid because no one's doing it and everyone is weak and they're a sheep and they just want to, you know what I'm saying? It's like if you come up with like a new sound in music, people are like, oh, that's fucking weird. Only weirdos are going to listen to that. You know what I mean? Like new things, like if you are coming up with new ideas or like new ways of doing things, like you have to get used to people not being into your ideas because they're new ideas and everybody takes kind of time to marinate and come around to things. And I mean, just think about like there's so many times that this has happened. The car was invented, everyone's like, well, why do I need that? I always yeah, so it's just like I think not starting, rejection is just it's embarrassing, it's demoralizing, it's fucking tiring. But, for a small group of us lunatics, the idea of not trying is worse. It's like, do I want to live my life and be like, oh, what if I had tried that? And even on days where I'm like, God damn, like this app has so many bugs, I'm not fundraising. I'm like, well, at least my life is exciting. At least I'm, I'm like in the arena trying new things. And, I can look back on, I've had tons of failures. I mean, every entrepreneur has a success story has probably tried and failed to start 10 companies. And many of them, they don't even think of as companies because they were just bad ideas and they didn't even make it to like whatever LLC stage. But like, someday I'll write a blog post of all the shit ideas I've had and tried, and it will be very funny. It's not that funny to hear from someone who's not really that successful, but like later on, maybe it'll be funny. But yeah, I mean, I think it's just a choice. You just have to like try and just know that most people are lazy and they're not going to put in the effort to carry something original forward. So you're not really competing with ideas. You're competing with other people who are just going to put their nose to the grindstone.
Yeah, that's well put. And I find it fascinating that a lot of people really like the idea of entrepreneurship and they like the idea of the success that comes with it, but aren't willing to put in the work and take action. But why do you think they're held back by inaction? Like you mentioned fears. Do you think fear is the main part of it? And if so, like, how do you get better at it? Is it like just a practice thing? Like you said, you've tried so many times and you just throw shit at the wall, see what sticks, and then you get more used to that rejection, more used to fear, I suppose?
Yeah, I mean, I think entrepreneurship is not for everyone. Like, one of these stories that I think is told is just like, I don't think everyone should be an entrepreneur, and I met a kid recently, and he's like, said he studied entrepreneurship in college. And I was like, what? What is that? Like, okay. I don't think entrepreneurship is for everyone. And I think you it's for you if you just have this like nagging itch that you just like can't shake. And if you are perfectly smart and, capable, but you still find yourself in a way unemployable because of your attitude or your frustration at a job. I mean, I worked at incredible companies. I worked at Intercom, very like successful startup with like tons of headroom to like try new things and experiment. And I still felt like kind of confined in a very specific role. And that had nothing to do with my boss or the company. It's just like, I'm just an outdoor cat. Like some people are outside cats. And, it definitely is hard. It's not for everyone. I definitely have had people in my life, they'll see me maybe take an afternoon off or be, working from Mexico City or something. And they're like, oh, it must be nice. And they have no fucking idea, how many times I've paid my employees but not paid myself, or just, fucking grind it out on a Sunday, figuring out how the fuck I'm going to do this new thing, or, just staring failure and rejection in just like while we're raising money, or if the market turns and your marketing agency doesn't have, at least just like waking up depressed because things like the wind is not in your back and you're just still shoveling the shit.
Yeah.
So not everyone has it in them. And I always feel like if someone's going around asking, should I be an entrepreneur? The answer is probably hell no.
Yeah, I agree. And despite all the struggles and like the problems you've run into and all the hurdles, would you say that you're now working on what you're meant to be working on right now?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know, like if everyone's meant, I don't know if there's like a God-given purpose, or I don't necessarily believe in soulmates. Like my husband feels like my soulmate, but like, do I think like it was preordained that we would meet? I'm like, no, I don't. I think we just were in the right place at the right time, and we were both open and honest about what we wanted. So like what you're meant to work on, like I don't feel like if you're doing this other thing and you know, oh, you missed the boat or something. Like I don't know, I'm not sure, but I do think it's like, if you're familiar with the Ikigai framework, it's the intersection of what you enjoy doing, what you're good at doing, what the world needs, and what you can be paid for. And I think I was circling it for a long time, and it's like, okay, I'm in finance. I'm not good at it. I don't like it, but the world is paying for it, paying me for it. Then I kind of shifted into marketing. I'm like, okay, I have more innate ability here. Does the world need it? I don't think so. I feel like River is definitely the closest I've ever been to it, but like, is it the only thing I'll ever work on for the rest of my life? I don't know. Probably not. I do think it's like very me, and I think you have to find the thing that only you can do. There were so many times coming up in my marketing career or running my marketing agency where I would see other people just like crushing it on LinkedIn, like being LinkedIn influencers and like having less experience than me and starting way later than me, but then just skyrocketing to like 50,000, 100,000 followers on LinkedIn. I was like, oh, I should have done that. But like, I didn't want to.
Yeah.
I didn't want to. It just wasn't like, it wasn't in flow for me. But my husband and I have always hosted like epic parties. We host this epic Christmas party every year. I love hosting and creating experiences for people. I love like leading people in like a very hands-off kind of way. That's like my management style. So like now I'm like, I look back and I can connect all the dots. I'm like, oh my God, River makes so much sense. And like all the weird shit I used to do that like seemed like a distraction from my career is like totally pouring into River. So I think you just have to like keep trying and keep exploring and realizing that something might look like a waste of time to other people, but if it's creating a flow state for you, then it probably will lead to something.
I agree. Sometimes my girlfriend questions why I do this podcast, sitting in a room for an hour with strangers, but this is like my flow state and I really, really enjoy it. And so I've also sort of framed it in a way where, it's more of a learning process. And if something else comes from it, then that's like a bonus. So
absolutely. Yeah.
I agree. Now, this might be a tricky question, but what would you attribute your success to?
Yeah. I mean, it's hard to tell how much of it's like nature versus nurture in the world. I have always done weird things. Like when I look back, I like junior high or high school. In junior high, I had this idea that like I wanted to host a fashion show, and I wasn't even like that into clothes, but I just like thought it sounded fun. So my mom helped me a lot, but like we went to TJ Maxx and they like lent us clothes, and I figured out who wanted to be in the fashion show, and then we had music and we like practiced, and like people came to it, and we like raised money for some charity. I don't remember what, but like I was in 7th grade, and it's just like a very, when I look back, I'm like, oh, I was very, in a way, entrepreneurial because I was like constantly dissatisfied with the traditional like school sports activities. When I was in high school, there wasn't a dance team. So I was on the cheerleading team, but I just didn't really enjoy the choreography. So I ended up like choreographing musicals for the high school music group. And I choreographed cheerleading routines for the junior high team. And it's like, I left the varsity cheerleading team to go do those things. And that was very weird to people. But I was just like, eh. Yeah. So I think like that, I think I've always kind of like had some kind of entrepreneurial itch. And like, thanks to my mom for like helping me plan a fashion show. And like not talking me out of, she could have easily been like, well, you really should stay on the varsity cheerleading team. And she's like, whatever, do you? I think another thing is, we didn't have a lot of money growing up. Had a single mom. She was putting herself through nursing school. We had food stamps and rent help. We lived in America, so it's like, poor is relative. But so I got a job at a young age. I started working at 14 and never stopped. I worked through the school year. And I ended up waitressing at some pretty high-end places for the town. And it really teaches you, you're working with mostly adults. And so if you're being a shitty teenager, you get feedback on that instantly. But also teaches you how to talk to anyone, because so many different types of people come in. And also there's like a lot of, not fear of rejection, but I don't know, you're kind of like starting fresh every time someone comes to your table. And you're just kind of like trying on personalities and figuring out who you are and what your style is. And so I would say like those couple of things. And then, I've just always felt a little confined in normal jobs. And I'm also like, I'm not that materialist. Like, I don't care about my salary that much. Like I do want to pay my bills, but I prefer freedom. And, I prefer freedom of like time and experience and working with people I love. And if I can't, buy those shoes or go on that trip, I'm like, I'm all right with it.
Yeah, that's really cool. And what's your favorite part of what you do at the moment?
I love bringing people together who have like kind of cathartic experiences on River. I'm sure that will dilute over time as we grow and maybe some of the communities aren't as specific. But I love getting people off their screen and like into the real life, into the real world. And I've had some investors push us really hard on like daily active users. And I'm like, ew, no, we don't need another app for that. We don't, I'm like, let's get people meeting in real life and like connecting. So I love that. And then the other thing is just like, my team is incredible. I love working with them all. It's stressful, but like I love trying to provide for them so I can keep them in this boat with me. And getting to choose who you work with and spend like 50 hours a week of your life with is such a gift. Not everyone gets to choose that. And I just find like a lot of joy in kind of like designing teams and letting them work together. And it's messy, but figuring that out.
Cool. And what's the goal for River? Where do you see River in like 5 years?
Yeah, good question. Sometimes I'm just like staring at this first door we got to kick down. So I think that as generative AI becomes more prevalent and like content in a way becomes a commodity, I think that people are going to want to engage with influencers and brands on a deeper level. It's like you kind of only have so many slots in your brain for newsletters you're subscribing to or podcasts or whatever. I would love to see all sorts of, not just like mixer meetups happen on River, but I'm really, I'd love to see Mr. Beast do like 1,000 ocean river park cleanups where he kind of activates all of his followers. I know he's like in it right now, but I would love to see political campaigns organizing on River. I think supporters could host private paid dinners in their home. And the sales from that could go to the campaign. I think if we can play our cards right on the sponsorship marketplace, I think eventually just like a digital ad network, people will sponsor, they'll set a budget on River and be like, hey, this is the type of community I'm going to sponsor, and I'll sponsor of, up to $1,000 a week or something. And I think people will divert money from like digital ad spend or even podcast reads like into these real life experiences, because 80% of brands do event marketing, and event marketing does have a lot of torque but it's a lot of effort and it's hard to scale the effort. And I think River might be able to crack that nut on doing that. But yeah, I mean, my vision really is like we kind of become the Spotify of getting together. Spotify has country artists and rap artists and rock and every type of genre. And I think we'll become that, where you can really like find a niche and find your people in your city and then go meet them.
That's exciting. And before I end every conversation, I ask my guest if they have a question for me.
Yeah, I would say, do you listen to David Senra, Founders?
No, I don't.
Okay, you might want to check him out. He's fantastic. But something he does is he reads books about founders. Some of them like Rockefellers, Napoleon, Elon, everyone. But what he does really well is like connecting the dots between all of these like really impressive people. Yeah. So if you could do that for me, like I know maybe you've done like 20 episodes or you're getting started, but like what's a thread you're seeing come up again and again?
The thread I'm seeing is quite a few founders have like a reason as to why they got started. It's not all the same sort of origin story, but there was like a fire lit under their asses that a normal person didn't have. Whether that's an idea that they're just so hungry to create or start, or like your passion for like community and bringing people together. Like I'd argue that there's not many people like you who get such a thrill out of running events like that. And some people were on their last dollar and backed into a corner. And so they had no choice. Some people were fired, but it's a common thread of like, there's kind of a catalyst event or thing. And either they had the gumption to get started or they were forced to get started, but there's some sort of thing that happened that caused them to get started. And I just find that fascinating. And sometimes they reframe that thing into their origin story. Sometimes it might have just been some little thing, but they see it and frame it as a story in their heads that like motivates them more to get that thing over the line and to get started, which I also find fascinating. It's all the stories that founders tell themselves and their positive self-talk and their confidence in their abilities that I think a lot of people don't have. And that's like the common traits between them.
Yeah. I think most entrepreneurs too they're fine with learning.
Yeah.
They just, I hear people be like, oh, well, I don't know how to do that. I'm like, oh, you think I do that? You don't, but you're just like, okay. And I'm very much a fan of like pull, not push. Like I'm not really interested in like reading about theory and then maybe using it down the road. I'm just like, I need to do this. How the hell am I going to do this? And then I'll just Google it or ask ChatGPT or ask a friend and then, okay, done. Next. What's the next thing I got to learn? And yeah, I think entrepreneurs are just really comfortable with learning. And they don't believe in like fixed states. There's no like, oh, well, I'm not smart or I'm not good at that. It's like, okay, well, I'll learn.
Yeah, it's the ability to figure it out. You put on the spot and it's not like, oh, I don't know how to do that. It's like, okay, I'll just figure it out or find someone who can do that job, but they will solve the problem. They're not going to be stumped by any sort of problem. Well, thanks for joining me today, Rae. I really appreciate you taking the time. I really enjoyed this conversation. Me
too, Baron.
Thanks. And if people want to find out more about you and River, where can they do so?
You can follow me on Twitter, on the X, on the tweets, at Rachel Lambert, but it's spelled funny. It's RaeChel. And then River is at getriver.io. I did not spend $1.8 million buying friend.com. Yeah.
Oh, awesome. Well, thanks for joining me, Rae, and chat soon.
All right. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening. I really appreciate you making it all the way to the end. I hope you enjoyed the episode. One more quick reminder before you go. I have a weekly newsletter by the same name, Another Excuse. where I cover 4 topics: something that has changed my perception, a tool that could be useful to you, content that is actually worth consuming, and a concept that I try break down and explain. If this sounds of any interest to you and you need a kick up the arse, then you can subscribe at the link below. Thanks for joining me again, and I'll see you next week.